Welcome back to John's Films. I get a question all the time. What should I build for DaVinci Resolve? Robert Shaver had a better idea for me. Instead of answering that one by one, what if you built a PC part picker list and then let everybody see it? Well, I think that's brilliant, and so I'm going to be doing it for 3 different price points today. We've got $1,000, $2,000, and are you crazy? Yeah, that's the last price point. So let's jump into the PC part picker list and I'll explain which parts I like and why. Our sub 1000 DaVinci Resolve workstation is built for the free edition of DaVinci Resolve. It has a second generation Ryzen architecture chip, that is the Ryzen 5 3600X, which is built on the 7nm process. Because we've got the newest generation chip and we want to use Precision Boost Overdrive, we've got an X570 chipset motherboard. This is the newest chipset and carries a price premium with it, but this gives you a great upgrade path in the future. In this case, we're putting in 16 gigabytes of DDR4 2666 memory. The Ryzen 3000 series of processors can benefit from faster memory, but from a price and compatibility standpoint, I'll show you what I mean by compatibility. But from a price and motherboard compatibility perspective, this is what I could find in PC Part Picker that would work. When I say compatibility, what I mean is you need to go to a motherboard manufacturer's website before you buy any specific RAM, and you want to check, it's typically in the support section for the specific motherboard you're looking at, and what you want to look at is CPU and memory support. In here, you're trying to see memory device support, and you want to see specifically the qualified vendor list, the QVL list, for the processor that you're going to be putting in. This is all of the RAM that they have tested to ensure works with the motherboard and the processor series that you're using. It is very difficult to find a match between PC Part Picker and the model number that is here. The PC Part Picker list for memory are not up to date as much as the testing against the new motherboards. So if you look at these and you pull out the part number that's down here on the left, that's what you want to match up to a particular motherboard before you buy the RAM for that motherboard. Next, we've got a solid state hard drive. This is a 1 terabyte drive. It is a little bit more expensive than some of the other 1 terabyte drives you'll see out there. I picked a brand I've worked with before. You're welcome to go look for ADATA or some of the other brands that might be about $30 cheaper and likely would give you the same performance. In the graphics card category, I wouldn't have picked this before because it's only got 6 gigabytes of video RAM. However, given that we're going to be using the free version of Resolve and more heavily relying on the CPU, and that Matt Jackson over at VW Life, we put one of these into one of his machines, and he's just loving the thing. It is running great. So really has me excited about what this card could do inside Resolve. And it doesn't spend so much that an upgrade later wouldn't be out of the question. And this system would overall support an upgrade of a greater graphics card. But to keep it under the price point, this is an excellent choice. When you're picking a case for a system like this, the cheaper the better. You don't want your components to fall on the floor, and you want general airflow through the system to be okay. This one generally gets the job done. There is a little bit more choked airflow on the front without any open mesh on the front, but it works pretty well. It's got an outtake and an outtake on the back, some more intake on the bottom. And I've built in this case, this is what Mini-Me lives in, and I haven't had any thermal problems with it. You'll note this has a Type-C connector on the front. Unfortunately, our motherboard does not have a Type-C connector or a header for it here. Many of the X570 motherboards do, but it is a price upgrade, and we're already spending a lot on this motherboard so that we preserve some upgradability in the future, so I'm not going to go that far on it. Finally, the power supply. This is something you want to have enough capability and enough power to push your system without, in fact, pushing itself. As you stay in the power curve inside a power supply, it'll stay cooler, it'll use less power, and the fan won't kick on as much, which is nice. So I picked one from a reputable supplier I've used before. This is the Thermaltake 650 watt, 80 plus bronze certified semi-modular power supply. This means that some of the cables are connected and some of them you can remove. So you'll notice the heavy 24-pin, etc. are connected, but you have the ability of plugging in or not plugging in some of the other cables as you need to use them. So this is our $1,000 workstation. I'm confident this will work fine in DaVinci Resolve Free. You will need to use proxies. You may need to optimize media depending on your codec, but for general editing needs, this will work great. If you intend to use Fusion very much, if you intend to use heavier codecs or stack timelines, multicam editing, this could get a little slow for you and you'd use optimized media, which would generate pretty quickly thanks to the 3600X that's in here. But I think you'd be happy editing on this on a daily basis. It wouldn't kill you overall, and if this is all your budget can support, this is what I suggest for a system. For potential upgrades, if you wanted to go above this, you could jump to an 8-core system, drop your X570 board to a B450 board or a X470 board, which are the previous generation, much like the 2700X is, and that would save you some money that you could then spend either in faster memory. You could put into a little bit more storage, which might be nice. That'd probably be the first thing I'd do, is add another SSD. Or if you wanted to, kick up your graphics card, but because we're using the free edition of DaVinci Resolve, that's not going to be the biggest bang for your buck by any means. Now we'll step into our DaVinci Resolve $2,000 workstation. This one is meant for DaVinci Resolve Studio, and there's some choices that we've made here, like putting a bit more money into our graphics card, that enable a better performance in Studio. It does, however, still come with the second generation Ryzen architecture 12-core processor, which is a 3900X. The reason I've put this in here, when you aren't going to be rendering in the processor quite as much, if you ever do want to render for high quality output, you're going to want to use the 3900X because you can only render H.264 and H.265 in your NVENC encoder that you find in your RTX 2070. Further, I find that video editors are somewhat impatient people and don't want to wait while they're rendering, so this gives you the opportunity to do many things at once, use multiple applications at once without any degradation or processor pipeline problems. Now, with the 12-core processor, we need to cool this with something serious like the 360mm radiator that comes with your NZXT Kraken X73. This has 3 fans on it and is something that you'll want to mount in a high airflow section of your case. I've used the Z73, which is currently on my machine, and I've been really impressed relative to 2 other coolers I tried on my 3950X with how well it cools. Next, you have the Gigabyte X570 motherboard. I chose this one quite specifically for the qualified vendor list memory RAM support for the USB Type-C. Here it is, a 3.1 Gen 2 Type-C header on the motherboard, which allows you to plug the Type-C connector into your case. I also have liked the power delivery, and you can see the quality here on this motherboard. The electrical interference that exists between the processor and the memory is none. You've got 2 capacitors here, which are intended, I think, to help with the memory power delivery. You've got solid power delivery here, which looks like, I think it's a 10+2 phase power delivery. I'll have to look into that. I'm just counting roughly there. You've got an M.2 slot here, an M.2 slot here, and separate capacitors here for your sound and audio, which typically does a good job of isolating the sound and keeping it nice and clean without the need for another DAC or graphics card. A lot of USB headers down here at the bottom for use throughout your case and for peripherals that you want to connect, lighting controllers, fan controllers, or whatnot. And you've got good support for memory availability. So you'll see that we were able to make a pretty good choice in memory. And while passive, you've got some good cooling attached to your VRMs and not to your chokes, though. That'll allow you to get cooler execution with your power delivery. Here on the back, you can see you've got integrated HDMI. It has 10 USB ports, though it has no Type-C connectors on the back here. Optical audio out and gigabit LAN to go with the wireless, which I upgraded to because I felt like a lot of users probably would be using this if you don't have any other servers or anything you're connecting to in your local LAN. It's pretty likely. One thing I want to call out, there's no Type-C connector on the back here for USB 3.1 Gen 2, and that could be a challenge if you're banking on it. However, there is a header on the motherboard here, which allows you to put one into the front case, which we have built into our Silverstone case that we've picked. Further down, I've chosen 32 gigabytes of RAM. Again, it's hard to find qualified vendor memory list in PC Part Picker, so make sure whatever you do, you check your QVL list for the exact motherboard that you got. In the storage category, I've gone with a tiered strategy here. One is a Samsung 970 EVO, which is a terabyte, and that'll be your OS drive. You've got your scratch drive here, and where you'll store your project files in this Kingston SSD. And finally, long-term storage here with the 4 terabyte Barracuda drive. Now to the graphics card. Because we're going to be using the Studio Edition of DaVinci Resolve, the graphics card takes a much more important role, and we're able to use the hardware encoding, but we're also able to GPU accelerate many of the effects that we can use, and a 2070 really fits the bill. I built this in the Windy workstation that I built maybe 2 months ago, and that thing is kicking. It is a fantastic graphics card for video editing. I'd highly recommend it. It has 8 gigabytes of video RAM. The only improvement I'd put on this, if you could find a 2070, and you won't because NVIDIA restricts it, but if you could find one with 11 or 12 gigabytes of RAM on it, that would be fantastic. Next up is the case. This is a Silverstone PM02. Haven't built in this specific Silverstone, but if you look at it, you can see it's got good cable management. It has plenty of room for hard drives as well as SSDs. It has adequate ventilation. You can see that it's got support for the right ATX motherboard form factor. Comes with a couple fans. Now it looks like it comes with 4 fans. That's insane these days. You've got cable routing through these grommets. Really, it's a decent case. It's got high airflow, or at least pretty good airflow through the front through these slits, and it's tempered glass on the side. So you really can't ask for more from a case at the $150 price point. It has USB Type-C on the top up here, which allows you to use that header we talked about on the motherboard. Finally, I've chosen a 850 watt 80 plus gold certified power supply from EVGA. Again, for this, I'm just looking for a vendor that I've used before and like. I'm looking for 80 plus gold certified or more, and I like to overshoot a bit on the wattage that this power supply can support, because I'm most likely to be upgrading inside the case, inside the power supply in the future, and I don't want to be constrained by having to go buy another power supply when I decide it's time for a new graphics card. Why add that $150 expense to your graphics card purchase, because that'll probably dissuade you from doing it in the future. That brings the total system in at $1994. However, it does require, remember, the DaVinci Resolve Studio Edition. If it weren't Studio, I could possibly make some different choices, and frankly, that's a $300 expense, but one that you're going to take from system to system, so I didn't include it in the price of this build. Here we are with our Let's Get Stupid build, which is in fact the build that I've got on my desk, so yeah, pretty stupid. But at any rate, it's a 3950X 16-core processor, precision boost overdrive to 4.7 gigahertz. It is a smoking processor. This thing is much faster than what I had with my Threadripper previously. As a processor, however, it is throttled a little bit against that Threadripper, as this is dual channel memory instead of quad channel. And the Let's Get Stupid build, yeah, really, this is the one that's sitting on my desk. Trust me, I know, stupid, whatever. This has replaced a first-generation Ryzen Threadripper 1950X. It is here in a 3950X now. Both of those were 16-core processors. This one, Precision Boost Overdrive up to 4.7 gigahertz. It is about 20% faster than the Threadripper machine, and I've seen a difference in timeline editing. However, you'll see a drop in rendering performance, especially when talking about the NVENC encoding when I get to benchmarks in later videos. And my guess so far has been that this uses dual channel memory instead of quad channel, so it doesn't keep the 2080 Ti as busy as it could. The NZXT Kraken Z73 liquid cooler is a 360mm radiator. It has the newest generation of Asetek's pump in it, and it does a fantastic job of cooling, in addition to looking pretty blingy, as it has an LCD readout on top of the pump. I have an MSI Prestige X570 motherboard, and before you go insane and see that this is a $500 motherboard, John, why did you do that? There's a few good reasons. One, I wanted 3 or 4 M.2 drives, which this has an expander, which runs through the Gen 4 PCIe lanes there and feeds the processor through this expanding card. It also has 2 of those on the motherboard, but further, it has 10 gigabit Ethernet. And I use this to my 10 gigabit switch, which then goes to my server for easy, quick access to data there. Comes with quite a lot of accessories and cables, but it has importantly, great power delivery with a passive cooling heat pipe attached to the VRMs, which regulate the voltage which goes into the processor. It has zero interference between the processor and the memory, which should enable great RAM compatibility. It has active cooling, as all the X570 chipsets do, but this one rarely ever turns on. Again, it has two M.2 drives under here, and it has two more you can pop into an expander card. Has the USB 3.1 Gen 2 Type-C here on the front for the header for the front. And when you talk about expandability, it has a ton of fan drivers, RGB headers. That's your optical audio. It's got a ton of options associated with the motherboard, much like you would expect for a $500 motherboard. I've found this thing to be rock solid, and I've really liked it. Next, we have 64 gigabytes of DDR4 3200 memory. You may say, John, you're missing the boat here. You should go with faster memory. I gotta tell you, I didn't win the silicon lottery. While this chip boosts to 4.4, in fact, it barely ever goes below 4.4 gigahertz, there's something with one of the memory channels, the fourth one, where it cannot support RAM running faster than around 2733, 2666 megahertz. So even this is overkill for this particular chip. I haven't taken that back to AMD yet. I've been pretty happy with the performance, frankly. Is there more out there? Yeah, but is it worth having to do an RMA? We'll see. In the drive category, I have two Samsung 960 Pros. One's 1 terabyte, has the OS and DaVinci Resolve on it. The second is a project drive, which I'm now using as Scratch because I had two of these in here, but one of them moved into a write-through cache in my server. And so now I've got 512 gigabytes of M.2 I use as a Scratch drive, and I've just installed an ADATA 1 terabyte drive for my project drive. I'm interested to see how this performs over time. It appears to be a great read and does a good job. But I've just installed this, so I'm figuring out how that's going to work. I have a 2080 Ti I bought last year. It is an expensive graphics card. However, I have not yet met something this thing can't deal with handily. I absolutely love this card. Really happy with that purchase. When it comes to overall performance, I did have two 1080 Ti's before that in SLI, and for the applications that supported SLI, that was a faster configuration. But I do love this graphics card. It's done great by me and gives me all that RTX shader goodness in the times when I jump into games. From a case perspective, I put in an Lian Li 011 Dynamic XL. This one is meant for water cooling, but is great expandability for me on an air cooling or all-in-one solution. I have the all-in-one radiator tucked behind this panel with a bunch of RGB fans running down it. Got intake on the bottom, got exhaust on the top. Really doing a great job of cooling. It has a Type-C connector on the front as well as 4 USB ports. I like the two-chamber design. So the motherboard and the graphics card sit up here. A lot of heat gets generated up here. Whereas in the backpack here, you've got your drives as well as your power supply. And that really has separated some of the heat generation. It also gives you a cleaner look from the front and the sides where you're able to really see into the case and see what's going on. Dust filters throughout. Really happy with building in this case. Spacious, easy. Trade-off, it's big. It's real big. And finally, to wrap up the Let's Get Stupid build, the Thermaltake Tough Power iRGB Plus 1250 watt 80 plus titanium certified. Now this is a power supply I've had for 2.5 years and is killing it. Really like it. It should for the price point, no doubt, but it has done a fantastic job for me. I really like the thing and am happy with the purchase, even at that price point. It rarely turns the fan on because it's rated at 1250 watts, especially now that I'm using 2nd gen Ryzen on the 7nm process. I'm really not using that much power out of it. The graphics card pulls the most power out of anything, and it does a great job of keeping up. So this has been a great purchase. Well, that's it. This is the Let's Get Stupid build, and it is stupid, but it works like a champ, so I am thrilled with it for DaVinci Resolve Studio. Some gaming in the off times. It is a blast. Thanks for watching. Let me know if you have better suggestions for hardware in the comments below. If you intend to buy DaVinci Resolve Studio, feel free, and please do use the affiliate link below. It will support the channel. The rest of the links in here are PC Part Picker links. They get the affiliate money. Thank you very much again for watching, and have a great day.